Welcome everyone to Career Conversations, a University of Rochester webinar series developed to help you leverage your existing talents and pursue new ideas. Whether you are an alum or a student or a parent, we hope this webinar on salary negotiation strategies and advocacy will help you to navigate your personal and professional journey. My name is Michelle Cavalcanti. I work in alumni relations, identifying and developing professional development resources and programs. Today, we are delighted to have Rachel Roberts with us. She is a 2003 graduate of the Eastman School of Music and Flute Performance and a graduate of Arts Leadership Program. She has enjoyed a career balancing nonprofit performing arts and higher education. Among other things, she has served as the first director of strategic planning and engagement at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. She moved to Boston, where she started and ran the entrepreneurial musicianship department at New England Conservatory. In June 2018, she willingly moved back to Rochester and the snowy winters to be the first associate professor of music leadership, where she is teaching 5 classes and managing Eastman's new 14-month graduate degree, Master of Arts in Music Leadership. While working in Boston, she earned her master's from Harvard's Graduate School of Education, where she focused coursework around leadership and organizational development. After completing that degree, she heard a radio interview about Boston's Mayor Marty Walsh's initiative to eliminate the gender wage gap in the city by 2030. One of the ways he is doing this is providing free access to salary negotiation workshops. She attended the workshop, found incredible value in the material, and trained to become a volunteer facilitator. While in Boston, she led 32 workshops and trained over 850 individuals in strategy for negotiating their salary. Now we are the lucky ones to have her here with us. Because of Rachel's initiative, the University of Rochester now has access to the same materials as Boston, created by the American Association of University Women. Now we are many across campus too. In addition to her role as associate professor, she's collaboratively spearheading the rollout and implementation of the salary negotiation information, working with alumni relations and other partners throughout campus, which is just beginning this semester. Rachel and I have already completed 2 events for alumni and students on campus, and I'm so appreciative of her partnership in this effort to provide useful skills for negotiating one's salary, but also bringing attention to this crucial initiative to eliminate the gender wage gap. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Michelle. It's so nice to see all of you online. I'm excited to share a bit more about this topic with you, as well as direct you to more resources. And for the next couple minutes, I'm going to turn my video off, actually, just so you can focus on the presentation, but I'll turn my video back on for the Q&A. So I believe that's off now. Great. Today, I want to focus on a little bit of the gender wage gap, provide some information and resources there. Dive into the salary negotiation material. And there's 4 steps to this process. So I will go over some of those with you, an outline of what it is, have a Q&A time together, and then direct you to additional resources. If you have questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to type them in. Michelle will be monitoring that and asking the ones that we can throughout this webinar, especially if it's related to a topic that I'm covering. If I don't get to it during the actual presentation, I will do my best to answer it during the Q&A time. I'm hoping to spend about 30 to 40 minutes of material, and then roughly 20-25 minutes or so of Q&A and discussion together, really answering the questions that you have about this topic. To begin, the gender pay gap, as you likely know, is how we describe the inequality between what men and women are paid nationally. And according to 2018 materials, women working full-time are paid 82 cents for every dollar earned by a man. If you break this down further, you can see there is a wide discrepancy of how women are compared to white men's earnings. Hispanic or Latina women earn only 54% compared to a men's salary, all the way through Asian women earning roughly 90%. This is what drives me and keeps me motivated in trying to share this information and leading a lot of these workshops, talking about this in classes with students or talking about it in communities in different ways. I first heard about this the same time I read an article that the BBC News put out saying at the current rate of change, it would be 208 years until women achieve gender equality with gender pay equality with men worldwide. And I thought, you know, I'm going to be dead in that time. What is it that I can do? And it takes a village to make change happen. So that's my motivation and interest in sharing this information. And if you look at these percentages, I think what's more shocking is to realize how this plays out by the numbers. If you look at how that discrepancy and difference equates to lifetime losses based on today's national pay gap, women overall lose just over $400,000 over the course of their 40-year career. Black women lose just shy of $1 million, $946,000 over the course of their 40-year career. And Latinas lose $1.1 million over the course of their 40-year career. That's shocking to me. These losses impact everyone, regardless of your gender. Statistics show that women are paid less for the same work. Women are overrepresented in low-wage jobs and underrepresented in high-wage ones. And they are discriminated against and face barriers that result in lower pay, sometimes because they are caregivers. And the impact to this is that they have less money to invest in themselves, whether it's paying off loans, buying a home, providing for their family and children as they go to college. There's less money to help with healthcare or wellness, less money to help care for family or go on vacations, you know, whatever it is. These lifetime losses impact everyone in the economic structure, not just women. I would also say that this information, the salary negotiation information, is beneficial both for employees and for employers. It's a benefit to have an awareness, know about this. Later, we'll discuss some laws that states have passed, but regardless of your position, regardless of your gender, I think advocating towards fair, transparent, and equitable work environments is something that we all can and should take responsibility for. Diving into this material, and as Michelle mentioned, this material is from AAUW, American Association of University Women. So I didn't develop this at all. I've just become a facilitator and have shared this information multiple times. What you are hearing today is a very distilled version of this material, but it's a structure that I believe is very concrete and able to help you regardless of the stage in the negotiation that you are at. Step one of AAUW's material is, how do you know your value? Whether you are seeking a new position or building up the courage to ask for a raise or a promotion, it all comes down to how well you can talk about yourself. This means your skills, your accomplishments, and your contributions. In this step one, I think there's 3 things to spend time asking yourself. And this is taking a step away from your resume. This is just about you. Asking yourself the question, what differentiates you? How do you bring value into your company or organization? And what skills, accomplishments, or work experiences demonstrate that value that you'll make in the position that you may be seeking? I'll also say I will make all of these notes available. So if I scroll faster, then you are able to jot things down. Please know that these slides will be shared after the presentation. And asking yourself these questions, I remember when I first took this workshop, it was hard for me to define some of this. I went to the workshop with a dear friend, actually, and when I was drawing a blank and going through this exercise, she reflected back at me a few things that she thought differentiated me and how I brought value to the company or organization. That was incredibly helpful to have a very trusted colleague and friend who knows me and my work offer suggestions in this area. It helped me take a step back from my resume and things that I thought about all the time and look through a different lens. I might encourage you to do the same when you start to think about how would you articulate your own value. If you are getting stuck or drawing a blank, ask a trusted colleague or a friend, and not necessarily that you're preparing for a negotiation, but instead, I'm doing an exercise for myself. Could you help reflect a few things back to me? I think that may help you get the ball rolling, especially if you're stuck at this point. After you've gone through this exercise, the next piece I would encourage you to do is write down as many accomplishments and skills and contributions or work experiences that you are particularly proud of. This is something that prior to this job at Eastman, I never really kept track of. We all have yearly reviews, and I would wait until that time to try to remember everything that I did in the past 365 days, which is impossible. Life moves so quickly. And while I was proud of things that I had accomplished, I was only skimming the surface on the big pieces of my work. When I started this role here at Eastman, being a faculty role, I knew and was given a heads up that I would have to fill out faculty activity reports every year. Someone suggested that I keep a document on my desktop, and anything that I do that's significant, maybe participate in an initiative or meeting, or a particular lecture that was really unique, or a design in class, or workshops and presentations that I give, like this one today. Write it down daily, and having it there on your desktop reminds you of that. And then when it's time for your review, or for me submitting a faculty activity report, you are not forgetting all the little things that you've done throughout those 365 days that add up into really big things that can be accomplishments and significant contributions to your role. So after you've done this step, the last piece to ask yourself, and you do this for all of them, not just one thing, but do it one thing at a time. What did you do to make that project happen? What role did you play? What were the results? How do you quantify it? Pick apart every piece that you have just written down and try to expand upon it. Knowing that level of detail will help you be able to talk about what you have accomplished and the value that you can bring to an organization, to an expanded role within the same organization, perhaps. And that last piece in particular, how do you quantify it? As much as you can, try to articulate numbers. It may be things that you may have difficulty thinking, well, I can't quite quantify it. It's more feedback-based. I encourage you to think critically about, is there a way that you could quantify it? How much feedback have you received? Being able to cite numbers and cite actual feedback or impact in some way or another will only further your ability to advocate for yourself and define your own value. Once you've gone through this initial stage and asking yourself these three big questions, then you translate it to your resume. You know, you are your own brand. So how do you want to take all of your skills and accomplishments and craft it for the resume that you're putting together? And, you know, I'm certain all of us have written at least one resume at this point in our lives, likely many, many more. Take a moment to review. Are you starting each line with action, active words? Are you showcasing numbers? You know, an emerging trend that I'm seeing and that AAUW has put out in their materials is not necessarily listing specific dates of employments, but rather listing something by years and months. For example, when I worked at New England Conservatory, I began in September 2009 and concluded my employment there in May 2018. So instead of writing on my resume September '09 through May 2018, I could instead just write 8 years, 9 months. The value of doing that is that a potential employer absolutely could call New England Conservatory and verify that that's where I've worked and that's how long I've worked there for. But if you have any gaps in your employment, this could also help not call attention to those gaps and instead just showcase the work that you have brought to different organizations. All of this is in an effort to be your own best advocate. Knowing your own value is where the basis of any successful negotiation begins. Like I had commented before, document your accomplishments. And if you haven't done it before, then begin today. Just put that document on your desktop and start adding to things. If you do this daily and if you do it weekly, I guarantee this will serve you well into the future. Think beyond your task. So we can get into the weeds every day, but make certain to think about how the work you are doing fits into the bigger picture, maybe of the organization or of the project or of your own interests. You know, for instance, I volunteered to facilitate these salary negotiation workshops when I was in Boston. And that wasn't my day job at all, but it was an interest that I had in getting involved in the community in a different way. So think beyond how is it a bigger project than just what you initially step into and think it is. Quantify your work. Absolutely bring data into the conversation wherever and whenever you can. And everything counts. There are many studies that show women tend to take on more things like event planning and side projects around the office. This takes time, and your time is valuable. So even if you think it's a side project, be certain to have that as a piece of your portfolio and recognize that that's something else that you are contributing. If you're contributing in one way, that's taking away from something else that you could potentially do. So being able to have the ability to talk about in full everything that you are doing is a way that you can be your own best advocate. Great. So part 2 is negotiations, knowing your target salary and benefits. For me, this was the hardest piece of where do I go? How do I prepare, right? There's 3 key numbers that you want to look at here. One is your target salary. What is your worth based on objective market data? The target salary range is a range that you use to negotiate with an employer. Your target salary, as identified above, is only the anchor. That's what you want to end up at. There's always, you don't start a negotiation with where you want to end up. So that's what your target salary range is getting at. How high is realistic to begin in that negotiation? And the last piece is your walk-away point. What is the lowest salary that you are willing to accept and still reach an agreement? This is dependent upon your individual circumstance. We'll talk about this later, but there's no wrong answer here. It's your own independent decision, and many, many factors can contribute to this. But these are the three big pieces of how do you benchmark. So let's dive into this just briefly. AAUW uses salary.com as examples. One of the reasons that they use this is because it is employer reported data, which means all the information of salary and benefits is accurately reported by the employer. Many people often question Glassdoor.com. That's a great resource too. None of this should be your end all of the research. It's just a beginning step of the research. But websites like Glassdoor often misrepresent all of the information that a salary may have or an offer may have because it's employee reported data, and they may be misrepresenting the value of the benefits in regards to their take-home number. But if you use salary.com, let's say you're looking at a public relations specialist position, this is what you'll find. And you go to salary.com, you enter the type of job that you're looking at, and importantly, you enter the zip code. So this zip code just happens to be in the Washington, D.C. area. What you're seeing are the average, or not the average rather, but that top of the bell curve is the median annual salary. So this is the full range of people in a public relations specialist job. In the Washington, D.C. area, where they are in terms of comparative earning potential and what they are earning in that position. The hardest part is understanding where your skills fall on this continuum. If you're new to the field, you may be on the left side of that bell curve. If you have more experience, you may be on the right side of that bell curve. And then it's also organizational dependent. It depends on how the organization compensates everyone. It may be an organization that doesn't have as much funding. So even though you may be on the right side of that bell curve, their compensation range may be lagging. It may be exactly in line with that bell curve, or it could be leading. Going back to where else do you find resources? This is salary.com is not the only place. I always recommend that if you're really interested in a position, call HR. Sometimes they'll answer, sometimes they won't, but it's always worth the question to them, what is the compensation range for this position? Maybe you know friends or colleagues who work in the particular company or the industry. You can call them, not to ask their salary per se, but to ask, do they have an idea of the range, or could they help you find out? And so all of this background research leads you to identify maybe where your range can be. Let's just say this is where you identify your range could be. And so that star is where you want to end up in this new position. So let's say that's close to $63,000. That can be your target that you're aiming for. But in setting that range and where to begin a negotiation, you don't start at $63,000. Research has shown that you want to aim 10 to 20% higher when you enter into a negotiation. You don't want to use a dollar figure, because as your earning potential increases, that dollar figure becomes less and less. So instead, always think of where to begin your target salary range and begin that negotiation with a percentage, 10 to 20% higher. And then your walk-away point. This is circumstantial, and it's dependent upon so many individual considerations. Most of us don't want to take a step back in salary if we are looking to transition jobs. You all have financial goals and obligations that you need to meet. Maybe you really need a position. You know this isn't your ideal position, but you have immediate needs that you need to meet. Whatever the circumstances, you should have your own budget set and mapped out, at least to know what's coming in and what's going out, to help you make an informed decision about what you can comfortably accept and what you cannot comfortably accept. This is all the more important to know, especially in doing your background research as to whether or not you want to apply for a job. You don't want to waste an employer's time getting really excited about a position and then not be able to conclude a negotiation because it's just so far below what you are able to accept. And the same as a hiring manager, which many of you have probably been hiring managers too. You don't want to waste a candidate's time. You want to be transparent about what is possible, what is not possible, and be able to make that informed decision at every step of the way. The other piece to consider, not just the hard salary number, but is the value of benefits. Perhaps these are more important in the financial picture than the hard take-home number. So it's important to consider when you're researching a job, is it possible to have flex time? What is the health insurance? Would it be possible to have funds for professional development? Whatever this is, consider this as you prepare for a negotiation, whether it's for a new position or for potentially asking a raise. And this plays into all of this. Step 3, how do you know your strategy? Step 1 was knowing your value. You've obviously successfully done that in the interviews. If someone is prepared to make you a job offer, you have demonstrated your value both on your resume and in person. And you've done the research to know what you would like to have and what you think the market would bear for that type of position. In knowing your strategy, here's a few tips for when you begin your negotiation. It's okay to have notes with you. If you do this in person, great, bring a portfolio. Write down your talking points. What are the things that you really want them to remember or that you want to communicate? If this is done over the phone, which I've done many times, I have my notes written out in front of me, either on the computer screen or printed in front of me. You've spent a lot of time and energy being able to get to this point, and you want to thoughtfully communicate everything that you have. So having your notes in front of you absolutely is acceptable, and I would recommend it. Always remain positive and flexible. Thank them, for the offer. Express your enthusiasm. And understand that a negotiation is really a conversation. There's going to be a give and take on both sides. I already got ahead of myself here. Negotiation is a conversation. I would encourage you not to get personal in the negotiation. You may have extenuating circumstances. I had a former student come to me to help with a negotiation one time, and she listed out all these reasons. Her husband was going to be without a job, they had to buy a car, they had to move across country, all of these things. But really, even though it matters so much to you, that does not matter to a potential employee. What you want to keep reminding your potential employer of is the value that you bring to the organization. Keep the discussions focused on that, not all of your other personal needs, but perhaps let your personal needs drive your own preparation. We'll get into this in step 4, but you really want to anticipate reactions and responses from the employer. This will help you better prepare for the negotiation. And always remember the offer has been extended to you. At that point in the negotiation, the employer has already lost time and lost money without having someone fulfill that role. They really don't want to go through this again. So they are willing to work with you to try to come to a successful conclusion. You are in a position of strength here, and with respectful conversations and thoughtful conversations, you know, negotiations can be successfully concluded in ways that help advocate for your needs and your next steps.
Rachel, we have a question that I think is appropriate for this time.
Oh, sure.
There was a question that came in specifically. It says, I wonder if you have any advice for negotiating compensation packages that include equity, particularly for pre-IPO companies.
Right. So I think there are different ways to think about that. The biggest one is, how does the company value those types of compensations and packages? You know, what has been extended to others? What are the protocols? What are the philosophies that that organization values in and how they are looking at valuing the company as well? And how does that reflect with the level of position that you are interviewing for? It's hard to talk about this generally without getting into specifics, but that absolutely should be a piece that you think about in terms of the benefits that potentially go with the hard salary number that you are negotiating at that time.
Okay, thanks. There's one more.
So write me offline, I might be able to share some other resources with you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another one I think we can answer now is when we call HR to get an idea of the salary for a specific position, when is the best time to call and ask HR? Before submitting a job application, after first phone interview, or during final stages of interview? Do you have a suggestion for that?
That's a great question. My suggestion would be the earlier the better, because you don't want to get to a point in the final stages of an interview and recognize that you are just so far off base that you wouldn't be able to accept the position. So I would definitely try to call HR or get a sense as to what that compensation level is in the very early stages, either before you submit or in those first rounds of interviews.
Great. I do have a couple of more questions, but I think we can wait until you get a little farther in your presentation.
Okay, great. So what was next was deflection strategies. In looking at whether it's the interview or it's the negotiation, I think there may be times where you might be asked a question that you are uncomfortable with, or maybe you are asked a question that's illegal. None of us want to be in that position, but it's always better to be prepared. There are many states that are passing laws about what can and cannot be asked in interviews, and a simple Google search will help you explain or help identify what some of those questions are. One of the biggest ones that New York State just passed and is now effective as of January 4th this year. Can you please tell me your salary history? If you are, now other states can still ask this. So if you live in New York, you can say, well, you can't ask me this. But if you're applying for a position in a state that doesn't have this, it's still available for a potential employer to ask. Instead of answering outright, you might think of responses like, this position is at a different level than my past position, and I'd like to focus on the compensation range that is commensurate with this level of work. If someone asks you, What are your salary expectations? You might say, I'd first like to learn more about the exact responsibilities of this position, and then discuss what your range is and maybe the philosophy that the organization has around compensating individuals and equity. Or you could simply say, I'd like to see if I'm a good fit first before we discuss salary. Sometimes employers may say, I need to know what salary you'd like in order to make you an offer. And I always kind of chuckle at this one because organizations have a budget. They know how much their personnel costs or the range that their personnel would cost. And so if you are in a position like that, you could say, I'd appreciate it if you could make me an offer based on what you have budgeted for this position, and then we can go from there. The key here is being direct and being prepared. Again, the laws are changing all the time and things are developing. So it's important to do your research about the state that you work in, Googling what are illegal questions to ask in an interview, or what are the salary equity laws in the state that I work in. There are so many great resources online, and I would encourage you to check those out, especially if you know that you will be engaging in an interview soon. I said this before and I'll say it again, negotiation is a conversation. And likely you will have multiple conversations. Sometimes you may have a negotiation done in a day, a couple conversations and you're done. But it's okay if it takes longer than that. Just be prepared with your strategy. Of course, saying thank you. If possible, I would encourage you to ask for time to review and prepare your strategy. Maybe it's 24 hours, maybe it's 48 hours, maybe it's over the weekend. It is absolutely fair to have request to see the full compensation package and benefits for you to be able to review it, fully understand it, and be ready for an engaged and informed negotiation conversation. And then set a time for a conversation. You discuss salary, you discuss benefits. Before you are signing on the dotted line, make certain that you review everything that is in writing. If it's not articulated exactly as you understand it should be, or that you feel is not representative of the conversations that you've had, bring it up before you sign it. Once you sign it, whatever is printed is what will remain in your file, and that's what will be held up by contract for your compensation and benefits that you negotiate. Some of you may be in a position where you're thinking about asking for a raise. The same strategies exist. Again, go back to the value steps that you have. How would you evaluate what it is that you've done, what you've brought to the organization, and what you're looking for? The timing for how to do this is that you decide when to ask. Maybe it's at the typical review time. Maybe it's after a big project has been completed. Maybe you're looking for the next steps in your career trajectory and just want to open that door for a conversation with your supervisor. So the benefit here is that you decide when to ask, and when you're ready, you are the one that sets a meeting with your supervisor. I wouldn't do this as part of your regular standing meetings. I'd set a separate time, email your supervisor, say, I'd like to discuss my trajectory here at the company and my professional development. Would you have time to meet in the next few weeks? And then you begin the conversation with a pitch. You are the one that has asked for this meeting, so the supervisor will look to you and Develop your pitch. If needed, bring this in a written or bullet point document that you can refer to. You might say something like, thanks so much for talking with me today. I enjoy working here. I appreciate the coaching that you've given me. And this past year was really exciting for me as I've had some accomplishments on the team. And then maybe list out 2 or 3 of these, going back to that value piece, using numbers and quantifying accomplishments where possible. And then say, I'd like to talk with you about increasing my role and responsibilities here and how that's reflected in my salary. According to my research, the market rate is this. I'd like to be considered for a raise that will bring me into this range. And then stop talking. This is the hardest part for me, but it's to stop talking and just wait. And what will seem like hours to you will actually be only 2 or 3 seconds. Totally fine. Similar to negotiations for a new position, this will likely take a couple conversations as well. The best thing that I would hope that would come out of this initial conversation is that you set another time to meet. And then when you meet again, discuss not only the potential salary and role, but consider the benefits. Similarly, get it in writing. Make certain that everything is understood the way you both have discussed.
I have a couple of questions here, Rachel. I don't know how many slides you have remaining.
I'm almost done. I was just going to say the last step is practicing. I'm a musician and I would never go on stage and sight read something. So, the same holds true here. I would encourage all of you to practice saying everything out loud and working with a partner to do it as well. Practice both the role of the employee and the employer so that you understand what the conversation may be. Anticipate any objections or reactions and how the conversation might play out. So those are really all the slides that I have at the moment, and I'd be happy just to dive into Q&A for the remainder of the time.
Great, we have some good ones here.
Okay, great.
The first one is, I've heard advice that it's too soon to ask for a raise in the first year of employment with a company. Is this true? And what if you had a slight increase in responsibilities?
My students laugh at me because the answer is always, it depends. And I'll say the same thing here. It depends on the culture of the company. It depends on your role. It depends on the nature of the responsibilities. Sometimes when you accept a new contract, you might build in there, especially if you haven't gotten to the level of compensation that you are wanting, you might build in potential for a salary increase pending a 3-month review or a 6-month review or something like that. So it's within both the employer and the employee's knowledge that you want to revisit this. If you haven't done this, and let's say you're in this position right now, you could always come prepared to a conversation at your review to articulate the value that you have contributed above and beyond what has been expected in your position. And in doing so, you might say, you might rather build a pitch to try to ask for a compensation increase. I don't think it's a bad thing to want to get compensated for the work that you do, but that ties into, how does your company or organization value compensation? Is this something that is commonly done, or increases and awards like this part of the advancement and professional development that the company extends? Or would this be something that is atypical? In either case, if you come to a conversation thoughtfully prepared, I would rather have that conversation myself than always be asking, well, what if, If the answer is no, it's no. But at least making certain that your supervisor knows the work that you have done above and beyond expectations, I think is a good thing to do.
Okay. Here's another one. I've been offered a promotion without a raise. How do you approach a conversation about your salary when your manager will not budge on this topic? Moving from an admin role to manager role with more responsibility and no raise, basically.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Absolutely. And I think this goes into benchmarking and looking at what other positions are valued at in the area, if that's possible. Quantifying the differences in responsibility. It sounds like maybe you have done that. But if you are able to really build the case and say, here's what I was compensated for this level of responsibility, and here is the market, what I have researched and found for this type of role and position, could I talk with you about an increase to come within this type of market rate for these levels of roles and responsibilities? The hard part is you never know if that will be a yes or a no. And if it's a hard no, there's unfortunately nothing that you can do. You can't force an employer to change, and they have financial constraints as well. So that then puts the question on you, is this something that I want to do, or does this mean that I should start looking for another position?
Okay. This one says, can you share any advice for negotiating with nonprofit organizations, given they are typically less likely to offer additional benefits?
Right. So I've worked in nonprofits my entire career, and I completely sympathize with this. Nonprofits are compensated at a much different rate. There's one resource that I use quite a bit when I lived in Boston, and it's an organization called Third Sector New England. And if you type in Third Sector New England salary compensation ranges, they are trying to put together, type that into Google rather, they are trying to put together a compilation of information in the New England area of jobs, compensations, and ranges similar to what salary.com has. Now, while those ranges may be different since it's in the New England and Boston area, which has a very high cost of living, this is something absolutely that you could put into a cost of living converter and understand perhaps what market ranges are for that. That's one recommendation. Another recommendation is to look around the area that you're living in. For instance, I grew up in Iowa, so you could look at a couple comparative organizations and nonprofits and try to assess what those compensation ranges are for those positions as part of your market rate when you're doing your benchmarking. I will say working in nonprofits adds another layer of difficulty and understanding what these compensation structures are. It is different than the corporate for-profit world. But there is a movement, along with not asking about past salary history, there is a movement for many organizations and states rather to, if not require, strongly suggest posting what the ranges are of those positions so that everyone is informed and it's becoming more transparent what a position may be offered at, so that you as a potential applicant can make a better qualified and informed decision as to, is this something that you want to pursue or not.
Great. There have been a couple of questions about this 20 to 30% more than your target salary, the idea of pitching kind of that percentage. Can you review again for people who are not fully understanding what you mean by having a percentage?
Great. Right. So what I mean by a percentage, let's say that you are taking, wanting to end up with a $50,000 salary, right? If that is your target, what you want to end up at, you are looking at beginning your negotiation 10 to 20% higher than that. And again, it's dependent upon the organization and the compensation level. Let's say you're entering into a negotiation and you feel comfortable starting 10% higher. So 10% of $50,000, quick math, is $5,000. I hope I'm doing that right. So instead of beginning your negotiation saying, you know, I really want to land at $50,000, you instead begin your negotiation at $55,000, understanding that you likely will have to come down to meet your target. So anywhere from that 10 to 20% range is where they estimate that you should begin your negotiation and have that range, understanding that you will come down. And most often organizations start on their low end with room to increase.
Okay.
Is that helpful? Does that explain it a bit more?
I think so. If we need to offer some more on that, we can do that with follow-up.
Great.
We have a couple more to get through, and I see that have about 9 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to them. This one says, I'm in the middle of a negotiation now.
Right.
The offer salary was $10,000 below the lowest end of the range that the search firm conducting the search for this position indicated. Additionally, there is a much higher employee contribution for health insurance that I have had in the past at past organizations. They met me halfway to what I indicated I need to accept. I would actually accept if they came up with another 25%. Suggestions for how to do this?
Yeah, again, this is very situational dependent, and feel free to write me afterwards if you'd like. But I think if you're working with a search firm, perhaps you might be able to ask them directly, you know, this seems quite different than what I initially understood. Is there a reason for that? Or what would it take to be able to move up to the level that you had been communicated with before? The other piece of your strategy that you may consider is, what is the value of those healthcare benefits that you would have to add on yourself, and be able to say, you know, this was part of my package previously, and this is actually how much it would cost me in this new compensation structure that would be you know, out of pocket and kind of working against that salary number. So if you were able to quantify that and explain it to them and say, you know, here's the salary number, yes, but it's actually not quite as much of an increase because of these additional costs that I would have, you could use that as a potential negotiation strategy for yourself in this particular instance.
Okay, thank you. This one says, what is your view on applying for jobs when the company asks you to submit salary requirements along with the job application? I'm also interested in this because this happens and comes up frequently. Other people ask that question a lot. So,
yeah. It does. If at all possible, I try to avoid putting anything in. I know a lot of times online forums, online submissions will not allow you to skip that question. This is where I try to do the background research to begin with and call them and ask them what their ranges for this position and be able to look at that. Also develop your own market range, and you know, what is that number that you are looking to take home? If we go back, is it that $50,000? Don't put that in. Put in maybe your buffer range, you know, what's something 5 to 10 to 20% higher than that as well. If possible, perhaps write in negotiable, you know, and if they're asking for this in your cover letter, one way to address it could be, you know, I'm interested in or my compensation range is flexible and negotiable based on what's needed in this position. So sometimes you just can't get around it. And if you can't get around it, then you will have to put something in. And if you put something in that's lower than what you believe should be, you can always negotiate later, you know. I don't want you to undersell yourself by any means. But if you put, let's say, $50,000 and you realize it should be at more like 65, where the compensation lies after you've done some more background research, you can always cite where you are getting that figure from, whether it's the amount of responsibility that you have, and the what am I trying to say? The research that you've done on salary.com, the market rate for these positions. You can always try to quantify it and say, well, I initially thought this based on learning more of this position and the responsibilities in the market. I would like to talk with you about a compensation at this particular range. So I think there's options. There's never one right way to go.
Right. There are two more questions. There may be more, but I think there are two more questions. One says, in my position, this is a little complicated. I do work that 2 employee categories can perform. Well, when I do the same work with data that demonstrates improved productivity compared to the employees in the other category, like the higher paid category, my employer is only willing to pay me at the top of my category. So there doesn't seem to be an opportunity to change categories. So they're wondering, how can you negotiate that, getting paid, being compensated, I suppose, for the work being done.
Right. Again, this goes back to being very clear about the work that you do, and you probably have tried to communicate this with your employer, so I'm sorry if this seems redundant, but it's possible to take a look at what that job is that you are doing and what that, both of those roles, and then take a look at that higher paid job role as well, and maybe print it out and make the connections very direct with your supervisor and say, I am hired to do this role, but I am meeting all of these skills and all of these expectations of this higher paid role. Can I talk with you about being compensated reflective to the responsibilities that I actually am working on?
Okay, I'm going to tell you the last 2 questions, and then we have about 2 minutes left. We'll squeeze them both in. One person, let's see, I anticipate being offered a promotion, and I'd like to use this as an opportunity to negotiate the offered salary. Do you have any tips for this scenario? And also, you've been thanked a lot for your very useful information. I just want to put that out there. And then the last one would be, what if I haven't worked outside of the home for 10 years? How do I negotiate a salary that reflects experience that I have acquired in volunteer roles?
Great. So the first one, okay, I'll try to do these each in 30 seconds.
I know.
Because then I have one more slide to share with everyone. The first one about being offered a new position, fantastic. Congratulations to you. And I would encourage you to, again, go back to defining your value, and what is the market rate? What is it that you are looking to have, and prepare your pitch, just as if you would prepare for a negotiation, prepare to re-articulate your value, your strengths, and what you will bring in this new and expanded role. Have that pitch ready, have that number ready of what you are wanting or aiming for as well. And not just that baseline number, but that 5 to 10 to 20% higher as well, so that there's room for you to come down and then to come up. For the other question about re-entering the workforce and having volunteer experience, that is fantastic. I would encourage you to, go back to that step 1. What is your value? What have you contributed? And of all of those volunteer pieces, what are the roles that you have played? What is it that you have contributed? What are those skills that you have demonstrated? And then look at a potential position that you are applying for. What is the language that that position is using, the types of roles and responsibilities that they are wanting in a successful applicant? And is there a way that you can somehow use your language that you present on your resume, have that be similar to what it is that they are asking for? You know, I think this is perhaps where it may come in useful to not have those dates on your resume, but instead just time periods of that volunteer experience or whatever it may be. But to also have in there your demonstrated skill sets and the value that you have brought in each one of those volunteer positions. So just to quickly conclude, I know the hour has gone by fast. Thank you all so much for these great questions. I just wanted to offer a few resources. This one, salary.aauw.org, you can go through the full salary negotiation training for free online at your own time. There are a tremendous amount of resources in there. And then here is another link. If you were interested in having one of these salary negotiation workshops, perhaps in your area, I know everyone's all across the country right now, let us know, let alumni relations know. We can't guarantee that any of this programming will happen, but we always are interested in knowing, is this of interest to you as alums? Is this something that you might like to do as a networking event for university alums in the area? If so, please go online and fill this out and let us know. And to end, here's my contact information. You can contact me here at Eastman. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at the Meliora Collective as well. I would be more than happy to chat with you, to stay in touch, to direct you to more resources. I know so much of this is hard to convey in an hour because it's situational dependent upon your own interests, but you know, I've tried to do the best that I can, and please don't hesitate to reach out, stay in touch, and thank you so much for sharing your time today.
Thank you, Rachel. We really appreciate this presentation. Everyone has said how helpful it is so far. We will be sharing the link to this video for people who want to watch it again. And as Rachel said in the beginning, we will be sharing the slides with everyone. The contact information will also be in our follow-up email for Rachel. So if we didn't get to the very last questions that came in, I'm very sorry, but I don't want to keep people from their very busy days. Again, a big thank you to Rachel, and I look forward to working with you around campus. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.